Call the meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting, January 26, 2016? Motion made by Supervisor Sopel and seconded by Supervisor Bramer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of the unfunded indigent defense mandate and the New York Civil Liberties Union, put it this way. They would like to advocate for the following services: counsel at arraignment, caseload relief, initiatives to improve the quality of indigent defense services, and development of ineligibility standards for representation. But again, this is being put forward as an unfunded mandate, and there are those that wish us to support them in seeking state relief. Any discussion? Yes.
I recall that something was, we were trying to coordinate with Marcy on this. Is everything squared away? And
I haven't heard anything from Marcy.
She did send out an email a week or so ago with an update, but I can't remember if she sent it just to my committee or if she sent it to the full board.
Yeah.
And I know, I think Bobby usually sent out something as well.
Do you want to table this until we get more information, or do you think there's enough support amongst the committee to go ahead and ask the administration or county council to put together something for us to consider at the next meeting, or put it before the county? I mean, basically, it's seeking some kind of relief for a good cause. We all agree with the cause, but now if Albany finances that, that'd be appropriate. But Supervisor McGill?
Just an observation. I would think the sooner the better, just based on, in 2013, Warren County spent $1,246,000 for indigent legal services. That's a very large number.
Yeah.
So if there's any relief, which I will probably doubt, but it's worth kind of going ahead and asking for relief. The sooner the better.
Okay, and I agree with you, but let's see if there's a consensus for that. Is that a motion?
Sure, I'd make a motion to that
Okay,
effect.
motion made by Supervisor McDivitt. We would like to put together a letter of support to pass this bill, and we're asking for substantial relief for this unfunded mandate. We support the mandates, but we want some relief from the mandate. Is that something administration or council can put together for us?
Sure. Yes.
I'll second it.
All right, seconded by Supervisor Montesi.
I think we should put the $1.2 million in there too. I mean, in our letter, how much we spent. Pretty impressive figure.
All right, well, that's an amended motion, and is the person that made the motion in favor of the amending?
Fine. Of course.
Okay. So the motion as amended, put it before the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any nays? All right. If you'll do that, then I believe that goes before the board. Next item, drones. I went down to New York City and I went to a association of towns, and I paid attention to drones, what everyone's doing. They're called unmanned aerial vehicles. A lot of safety issues, but a lot of potential issues. I mean, Amazon deliveries, for example. But some of the real critical issues came up with surveillance. Law enforcement, can they use drones? Do they need probable cause to use a drone? Do they need reasonable suspicion as opposed to probable cause for using a drone and unearthing evidence? The Border Patrol down Texas, they've had all kinds of issues with that. Should it only be used in exigent circumstances? You know, there's already a bill before the Assembly, 03597. You know, they're proposing to prohibit it above 400 feet, and, the craft can weigh no more than 10 pounds. But it appears the bill before the Assembly, and there's another bill before the Senate, changes almost every day. I mean, it's very elusive. In Texas, they've tried to regulate it. You know, could the state use it for, you know, surveying and studying spills and fire? Law enforcement. If there's a prohibition of a drone usage, and police used it to gather evidence, can they use the evidence? Or is the evidence inadmissible because they used a prohibited law? There's all kinds of, it's really messy. So, you know, should we be flexible with law enforcement? Where do you want to go with law enforcement? In Utah, they've had all kinds of issues with it. Ultralights, but ultralights are not regulated by the FAA. Drones will be. You know, they just went through and they said this is an incredibly messy situation. So I guess my question is, do we as a county want to get involved with this now? The state, like I said, there's 2 or 3 bills dealing with drones in the state, and they're finding it very messy. Other states are dealing with it, they're finding it very messy. Why don't we let things work out, is what I'm suggesting, before we decide to come up with a Warren County law regulating drones? Unless there's some compelling reason to adopt a drone law, Warren County, and if so, put that forward in our discussion. So I'll open it up for discussion. Drones. Supervisor McDivitt.
I totally agree with your observation and analysis. It appears to be a very, very murky environment category. It's almost as if it's a scenario where you're going to need federal and state legislation to go forward, to be then challenged in a court of law, to be overturned, to be brought back. This looks like an arena of variables in law that is probably better left to the boys and girls at the top of the food chain, so to speak, to go forward with legislation, and just then maybe we can piggyback on that whole scenario. So I agree with you. I think it's premature at this point.
Okay, other committee members?
I was digging around in my
Bremer?
file for the Rockland County legislation. What were they legislating? Were they running into problems that we should
Every
anticipate?
county that's adopted this that I know of has run into problems. I mean,
But what
if we're
was
not
the
with
impetus
law
for them?
enforcement, it's with privacy. If you know, the drones going to the neighbor's house and then putting the pictures that you caught through the bedroom on the internet. I mean, it's wide open. There's so many open-ended issues and questions that the whole country's trying to deal with right now. I don't see why little old Warren County is gonna come up, and we got all the solutions. I don't think we do, unless you know.
No, I don't have the solutions. I'm just saying, what was the impetus for them to, right now, are they completely, you can use them as long as you follow FAA rules, which is like the 5 miles.
And
from
the
there.
FAA are developing rules, and you know, you have to get them registered now. You can do that online. It costs $5. So if you catch the drone that did the dirty deed, you're fine. But if you don't, the drones come up, they disappear. How are you going to get the registration number?
Shoot them down.
Well, is that legal?
Well, I think that has occurred, okay? I think there's a
Yeah.
case out there where where a neighbor was, all of a sudden the drone was by his daughter's bedroom window, okay? So guy got incensed, he got out his shotgun, and he shot the drone down. He then got prosecuted for shooting the drone down, or for whatever he got charged with, and I don't know what the outcome was, but there's certainly degree of emotion involved when, you see a drone peeking in your bedroom window.
Well, and I could see we could use drones for building and code enforcement. Just survey the whole town and look for the infractions and nail them. You know, we could go right in their backyards and see what they're doing, and I don't think that the public's gonna look at that favorably. All right, so I hear some people saying, let's table this and let, the country sort it out a little bit more before we get back into it. What's the consensus?
Motion to table it.
All right, motion made to table it, by Supervisor Gerard, seconded by Supervisor Sokol. Any further discussion? Those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? All right, it was unanimous. Drones. Okay. Next item, agricultural districts. I'm still trying to learn about agricultural districts. So, I'm gonna listen to what you folks have to teach me and about, because there was nothing, I haven't been able to run into anybody that's familiar with agricultural districts. I know we fumbled with it at the last meeting, and we said, well, we'll deal with it a little bit more at this meeting. And we even said that we would invite, somebody from Soil and Water to come to our committee and discuss it with us. That connection, to my knowledge, has not been made. But it, yes.
I did speak with Jim Lieberman from Soil and Water, and he was able to give me a few names from the state, who have much more experience with agricultural districts. Unfortunately, we just haven't been able to, we weren't able to get him here for this meeting, so it's kind of an ongoing thing. They're quite busy and it's not following in line with our schedule at the moment, but.
Okay, so Soil and Water has somebody that they could bring that would explain
Yes,
this?
they gave me two different names that I've been trying to get in contact to see if I can get one of the two, or hopefully both, for one of our meetings. I just haven't been able to arrange it yet.
Okay.
John, I think the biggest deterrent that I can see in terms of is that once you establish this is what I read, once you establish a farm district or an agricultural district, that district kind of supersedes any zoning that you might have in your community. So, you know, there's a lot that could happen on that district that would be contrary to what the zoning is.
Okay, so there's a negative. Are there any positives? Yes,
Chairman,
Supervisor
on
Light.
the other hand, it can help enforce those zoning regulations if you were trying to curtail suburban sprawl into agricultural areas and such. So there is a positive side on that.
Yes, Supervisor Bramer.
I don't believe it supersedes the local law, the zoning. It would supplement it. Just what you're saying is if you're trying to target a certain area for agricultural and not industrial or suburban, this would further support those efforts.
Well, yeah,
To
but that's what
concentrate
zoning does
your-
anyway.
And it provides funding through the state. Can help people get funding through the state.
But I mean, for instance, if you allow a farm, then he can do pretty much anything on that it sounds nice and it sounds like we're being environmentally friendly and we're gonna set some, you know, land aside just to be farming, but, you know, you can go buy some pretty rustic looking farms and, you know, whether it's manure pits or, you know, barns that are built, too close to the road, they don't have to agree to any of your zoning restrictions. So, you know, you gotta give that some consideration. I'm not sure what the advantage is to the county or the towns. I mean, do we get a tax break? Do they get a tax break? Is the sales tax, I mean, what is it that, why would you wanna do it other than the environmental issue of feeling good that we preserve this 50 acres? I mean, that's the question I have.
Yes, Supervisor Wood.
Just, when I was in New York as well, I took the Got Junk presentation, which was interesting in itself, but one of the things they noted in that presentation was that if you have an agricultural district and a farm, as far as the property maintenance, you're limited as to what you could tell them, you know, farm vehicles or sometimes unlicensed, unregistered and whatnot. So that would be, something that, you know, it would limit the municipality's ability to keep the property maintenance or affect their property maintenance codes if they have one. And then, just also, the agricultural district would limit some of your ad valorem or your benefit districts. The local municipality's ability to impose those rates on the farms will be limited if they're in an agricultural district. So it's just something to bear in mind. I don't know how many, I guess it would depend on what your district was, where it was, as to how it would impact folks, but it could impact local towns.
So there appears to be pluses and minuses, and I'm getting the feeling that we should probably leave this discussion open for the next meeting. In the meantime, Evelyn and I, Supervisor Wood and I, will not take any action. We'll discuss further at the next meeting. In the meantime, we will try and get somebody here that knows the issue better than we do, and will share some of their thoughts with us, and so we'll postpone it to the next meeting. Yes, Supervisor Seaver?
I just have a quick question about the order we're going in next. I'm aware that item number 3 has a couple different presentations. May I just briefly bring up another subject that I don't see on the agenda that we discussed in January 26th?
Well, we do have other discussion items at the end.
Okay, I was just afraid
You're
we might
talking
not
about
have
the fireworks thing?
Yes.
We weren't ready for it. Yeah, there were a couple of ducks that needed to get in a row before we brought it to the meeting today, and so I was gonna just defer that for the next meeting.
Okay, I just
I
don't
made
see it
that
under,
choice.
here under table. My only concern is that the clock's working against us in terms of when that local legislation needs to be changed. And I was under the impression it had to be in April, so.
Well, I think if we can bring it forward, does it have to be done in April, to anybody's knowledge? And I'm not sure which fireworks thing we're talking about. I know that you would like to have something in our legislation that, outlines that those who carry fireworks must give a safety pamphlet to those buying them at the register, if I understand that correctly.
Well, correct. On January 26th, the committee approved that and approved the amendment, under the local law number 2 of 2016 that went, supported by 3 of 2015, that revised language. And I'm not sure why we tabled that part of it instead of just bringing it to the full board meeting.
Well, because there was some other issues that came up with the fireworks that I
Right,
needed
separate and apart.
clarification on, and so I decided to take the whole package to next month.
Okay, would it be possible just leave it on pending item then, or be able to talk to our county attorney? If it has to be passed in April, I think it's gotta get to the full board. In speaking with the fireworks company, when we went to NISAC, they did indicate to me any of those changes needed to be made, by our April board meeting. Perhaps I had misinformation, but.
Brian, are you aware of any timetable constraints?
Well, the timetable constraints that I could think of would be that a normal process without a special meeting to pass or amend a local law is gonna take 2 months because of the notice requirements and the public hearing. The only time constraint I can understand is that the time periods that allow for selling those items that are not deemed fireworks within the local law, one of the time periods is, I think, the end of May. So would need to get something done.
All right, so when we meet in April, maybe we can make the May deadline.
Well, with all due respect, I do think that you have to, because it's a change in the local law, be able to have that public hearing. Perhaps we could just talk outside of committee about it and see if it's something we could bring up
Well,
at
the
the full
other
board.
thing is, we got a big issue coming up, and I know it's gonna consume a meeting, and I am terminating this committee meeting at 10 o'clock.
That's exactly why I wanted to bring this up before that.
Yeah, okay, I see that.
Did we finish our discussion on the agricultural district or come to a conclusion?
Well, I was coming to a conclusion, and I don't know if it needs a vote or just a consensus, that we would, take no action on this item. We would leave the discussion open and bring it back as an agenda item in the April, Legislative and Rules Committee meeting. Do I need a motion for that or anything, or just? Normally, I would just handle it that way. Okay, so that's the way I was gonna handle it. All right. Let's, then go to the petition for redress of grievances. There has been a discussion of, should we take a look at our county governance? Is what we have, a Board of Supervisors form of county governance, appropriate and best for us? There's 62 counties. Each county is unique in its own way. Some counties have gone to other forms of county government, legislative form, for example. Is that right for our county? Well, there's been a petition for a redress of grievances that claims 14th Amendment equal protection provision. One person, one vote. Equal protection is an open question. Is it only the voting people that we're talking about? Because it's interesting that in the town of Queensbury, we have looked to redo the borders of our wards because over the decades, they've gotten quite uneven. A fourth ward, for example, has developed fast and furious, whereas Ward 1 has remained relatively stable over the years. So we've gained an inequity in terms of population. Okay, so we proposed, and we shared our thoughts with the Warren County Board of Election. We proposed a new drawing up of boundaries that, based on the 2010 census, gave equivalent people amounts. The Board of Elections reviewed that, and they did not like it. Because the registered voters in each ward was skewed heavily towards Ward 1. The population numbers were the same. The registered voters were very unequal. So they said, should we be using registered voters as the proper way to draw up the boundaries so that registered voters, the number of registered voters is even? Well,
John, just so the folks know, the Ward 4 had about 9,000 people in it, and Ward 1, 2, and 3 had about 3,500. I think that was roughly the numbers we were looking at.
yeah. So when you say equal protection, it's not as clear as you might think it is. I know that former Supervisor Westcott is going to speak to it. He has a kind of white paper in his opinion about it. And Supervisor Leggett also would like to have a presentation to us because he has his opinions about the matter as well. But I just thought I would start the conversation by saying the idea of equal protection is not as clear as one might think. If you were to go to registered voters as a fair way of distributing districts, then how about those that rent that don't tend to register to vote? How about those people that are here seasonally? They're here, they live here, during the summer months. They may live here 5 months. They may live here 6 months. They're registered elsewhere. Should they get fair representation? Kids, young people, aren't they entitled to fair representation? All right, well, these issues are not going to go away. Ebenwell and Abbott, a case before the United States Supreme Court. Okay, traditionally, we have divided up our assembly districts, our state senate districts, our congressional districts based on population. That's being challenged. They're saying that's unfair in Ebenwell versus Abbott. Now, they're challenging this one person, one vote, the traditional approach to equal protection. They argued it before the Supreme Court in December. The decision will be forthcoming this spring, but it will probably be an interesting one. And we all may wanna pay attention to that. In any event, I think it's fair to say, let's discuss governance. Let's discuss our current form and other potential forms. It's worth a discussion. So, I wanna see if any, before I allow former Supervisor Westcott to speak to us, and then I'm gonna allow Supervisor Daggett to speak to us. Thoughts from committee members? Yes, Supervisor McDevitt.
Since there is a case pending before the Supreme Court, obviously that's the decision we will all look to, but I'd like to express a personal opinion. I think population is the criteria. If you as a human being, for whatever reason, choose not to register, good reason, bad reason, irrelevant reason, how much do we as a society want to micromanage the electoral process? We live in a world of choices. You choose, your choice. You choose not to register to vote, you're not counted. That's how I look at it.
Okay, any other discussion? Yep, Supervisor Wood?
Just gonna go back to, what I had last month. When I read this, I do not see anything in here that says there's something wrong with your county government, let's change it. I see no proof that there's anything wrong, there's no evidence. When I read this, it seems to me that the big issue is the votes are not weighted at the subcommittee meetings. That's what I get when I read this. For that, I think we've got county law that pretty much clearly states that the chairman of the board is gonna appoint the committees every year. Obviously, it'd be at the behest of the chairman. We had Steve Aquario come and talk to us last month. I thought he did an excellent job. I was very glad he was able to come. He shed a lot of light on the information. The takeaways I had from that were, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. That there are many counties that have our structure or similar structure, and that there are a lot of counties that have a committee system that is not a weighted vote. So, and as far as the mayor issue, I think he resolved that as well. I think Steve addressed that. So I'm very glad that Steve was able to come, but for me, I think Steve answered all the questions I had. And I'm just gonna go back to saying that this does not say we wanna go to some other system. This says we got an issue with weighted vote in committee.
And that may or may not be an issue, but we can discuss it. Supervisor Seaver?
I think, just responding both to Supervisor McDevitt and Supervisor Wood, I think one of the benefits they have, both as a ward supervisor and a town supervisor, is they both represent 100% of the population who elected them to office. Whereas in Queensberry, we run town-wide, we work very hard in our elections, just like everyone else, but we come up to the table and we get 20% of a vote. I think that we do have some inherent problems, and Supervisor Stroud, one of the things I'll be doing is coming to the town board as well and asking for consideration to change our at-large structure to a ward structure, much like Glens Falls, to better represent our community in Queensberry. I do think that we are not seeing one person, one vote within Queensberry, and there's many stories for why it was developed the way that it was, but from what I've been able to gather, is it's a change that will have to take place at the town board and perhaps with some support from the county. So while, that's of interest in having these discussions today, I do think that particularly for the largest jurisdiction within the county, we have a problem with equal representation. Furthermore, I also think that the county executive discussion is a healthy discussion. I keep hearing, if we're not broke, don't fix it, but yet we have inherent problems within the type of structure that we have, or at least in my opinion, on the power, I guess would be the right word, that goes to an appointed county administrator. I think that it is prudent to take a look at, is there an opportunity to do a hybrid system, to look at an elected county executive who works for the people in the same way that we all do. So I do think that it is a healthy discussion. I certainly recognize the concerns from the towns, but it should be something that we look at, and as you've suggested, perhaps, either an ad hoc or a citizens committee might be better suited for this type of discussion. I would envision that it's lengthy, but I obviously respect both Supervisor Wood and McDevitt's opinion, but I do think we need to start looking at the structure of the Queensberry supervisors as well.
Well, again, that all depends on what we end up with. I did several scenarios on my own in looking at the legislative form of committee, I mean, if you round off the numbers, we're almost 70,000 people in Warren County. So if you wanted to create 10 legislators, each legislator representing 7,000 people, Queensbury would end up with 4, including the supervisor and 3 others, so that ward system idea wouldn't work. Glens Falls would end up with 2 legislators. One could be the mayor, the other could be an at-large supervisor, so they may go to an at-large version. And the remaining 4 supervisors would be divided up among the other 10 communities, which you could argue that doesn't give them very fair representation. But we'll get to that argument later. So let's see where we end up. I also did it making 5 legislators. And, you know, this is my paperwork on county government. And I've worked on it a couple of nights, long nights. I'm gonna try and remain open-minded. I have my thoughts about it, but I also looked into other things with other counties that have the legislative form of government. In some cases, it's not pretty. But if you went to 5 legislators, that would be 2 for Queensbury, 1 for Glens Falls, and 3 for the other 10 communities. So, you know, is that fair? 3 legislators representing 10 communities? If I was a legislator from one of those communities, I'm willing to say that I would probably pay more attention to the community I'm from than the ones that I'm not from. You know, and some, it's a full-time job because there's other discussions that came into here that really don't have anything to do with that, daytime or nighttime meetings. Well, wonder if we had legislators and they were full-time jobs with benefits and everything else, because some of the counties that have legislative governments have that. But I'm not gonna get too far into the weeds. I do think this discussion needs to go to some kind of committee, if that's the will of this committee. Yes, Supervisor Montesi.
The comment about an elected administrator versus an appointed kind of troubles me a little bit, because an elected administrator doesn't have to listen to me as a supervisor or my town or my concerns. He's elected. He can do his own thing. That bothers me somewhat. The other thing is that when we talk about the mayor being part of the county, well, if you go to a legislative thing, you just destroyed the fact that the town supervisors represent their town. I mean, how can one guy or gal represent 3 or 4 towns up north and know what the concerns are for snow plowing, for paving, for all of the concerns that a town supervisor has, and a mayor, for their particular community? And I think as Supervisor Wood says, you know, it's not broke yet, and you know, what are we trying to fix?
Well, you have 50% of the population in Warren County is Republican. Should only 50% of the supervisors be Republican? And then if you have a Republican supervisor or, you know, running for office, administrator, I should say, running for office versus a Democrat administrator running for office who might be twice as qualified, who's gonna win? I mean, so it's not always fair.
I mean, we're gonna be reviewing for an administrator, and we're gonna look at applications and qualifications.
And hopefully you're gonna
If somebody runs for office that isn't even qualified and wins a popularity contest, boy, what does that say to us, and what does that give us?
and you're gonna pick the most qualified. All right, before we go to Supervisor Westcott, any further thoughts? Former Supervisor Westcott, would you wish to?
I have a PowerPoint presentation, how do I set that up? I was told I could make a presentation.
Yeah, you can. I know Leggett came earlier and put his on board and got his going. So, since Leggett's up there, let me reverse the order.
Sure.
I would much rather give floor, no,
Supervisor.
I think it's only better to come second.
All right, well,
That
can
I
somebody
think might
arrange
be-
for Supervisor Westcott to fire up his
More than happy to have you go
PowerPoint?
first, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Very interested in hearing what you have to say, and looking forward to having coffee with you soon to sit down and talk about it. Hi, Claudia.
All right, so is that okay with you?
anything's okay with me, John, you know how easygoing I am.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
We don't need an elected, change the law, if you don't like it, change the law.
It's the
Why
one,
would we rehaul the entire
appeal
form of
point,
government just to change the
001,
administrative?
No, and I don't think there's likely, and I don't think there's support for that, but in the meantime, I mean, I don't think it's
Is there a clicker?
position. I think the town of Queensbury change the redistricting board, that is, well, it's a bigger issue at the time, because you get 5 people who have 85 weighted votes, when really it should be,
I gotta go see what that issue was, you got it.
no, but I made a lot of decisions where my town doesn't have anything to do with yours,
Right,
you
but
know?
as far as what the town of Queensbury would have to make the decision to go to, an at-large
Right.
award.
Mr. Chairman, I gotta go grab a binder off my desk, I'll be right back.
Because of that, because of the way the structure is. I mean, we're the only ones on the county board that are at large versus board representation in our town.
But a lot of us won't interfere with another town.
Good day
We
yesterday?
don't want them coming
Yeah,
in
it was
here
really
ours.
nice. Went over
We
to
don't go in,
my son
you know,
Steve's. He
like,
had
I would never go to another town and tell them how to
dinner after
district their people, because I don't want them to come to my town and tell me how to
my
district
mom.
mine.
But at county
Mary
level, it
Riggin,
seems like that's
she's
exactly
always
what's going on all the time. Like we're
Mr. Chairman, you want me at the
Yes,
podium?
please, would that be better?
County and the town.
Frank, what did I do? I saw you pointing at me, what did I do?
You have the floor.
No, I work for the entire town of Queensbury, my raises are expensive, and then I only get 20% of the vote.
They do wonders now. She goes gets a shot and then carries about 6 weeks. She still reads and that was hard.
Those, PowerPoint things never seem to work. There you go. It's working now, guys.
Yeah, they have to plug it.
Whatever you just did, it's working.
Good, just went out with Brent and Jen, just went up to Jackson.
All right.
Well, you make a good point, I'll remember it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to present this morning. I've got 10 minutes, so I'm gonna do my best to stay to that, sir, and, I would ask if you have questions or comments that you please hold those to the end so I can get through my presentation. I think, we're all here for the same reason, which is to, take a hard look at our government and see if there's in fact a way to do it that's better and more fair. And so I've taken a look at our current government. I also have spent a lot of time on this. We all know how it works currently. It's a weighted voting system, and since Supervisor Leggett was presenting this morning, I just used Chester as an example versus Queensbury. Chester has 5.1% of the county population, so in board meetings gets 51 votes out of 1,000. Queensbury with 42.5% of the county population gets 425. Fair enough. Claudia, I may need your help.
Okay.
We just click. This is but I think we need to take a closer look at this, and it has to do with what Supervisor Seaver was talking about. We've got Chester's Town Supervisor Craig Leggett. You can just go through 3 of these quick bullets. He was elected with 513 votes. He represents 100% of Chester when he places a vote on the town board, and that means he gets 51 votes out of 1,000. Very fair system. If you go to Queensbury, and we'll take a look at John Strow. That's good, thank you. John got elected with 4,230 votes, townwide, all across the whole of Queensbury. Yeah, he only has 20% of the voting rights on the board. That's 1 out of 5 votes, even though he runs town-wide and represents 42.5% of the population. He gets 8.5% of the board vote. I think that's not one person, one vote, any way you look at it, and I'll be looking for comments later to see if others agree or disagree with that, with those facts. Those are facts. Next slide, please. I took a look at the whole board, and I think this doesn't get into registration. John, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I was not aware of that. I do agree with Supervisor McDevitt. It should be based on population. I think that's the only fair way to do it, in my own opinion. But this is the board broken out by election votes in 2015, with the exception of Chairman Garrity, who ran the year before, and what their board votes are. And the fact remains, all 5 Queensberry supervisors run across 100% of Queensberry. It's a big town. Those races can be expensive, while the rest of the board runs 100% in their town or ward, and they get to vote 100% on the full board. This system currently is not one person, one vote. I did meet with Supervisor Sieber. We talked about going to the town to talk to the town about how this could be responsibly addressed. Next slide, please. We all know that the power is in the committees. Almost every resolution that comes out of committee is passed by the board. I got these numbers from Amanda back in December. I haven't updated them since then. I think there was one more board vote after this. But at that time, out of the 671 resolutions that went to a vote by the full board, only 3 did not pass. 3 others were tabled. I'm not sure what became of those. But if you just take 3 out of 71, 99.1% of the resolutions that go to the full board get passed. So if there's one person, one vote, then this situation would be okay. But in committee, there is not one person, one vote, any way you want to look at it. Next slide, please. In committees, each supervisor is assigned 1 vote equally, regardless of population. 1 vote out of 20 equals 5% for each supervisors. The supervisors represent towns from 1.1% to 42.5% of the population. And for the towns, supervisors have their power in committee doubled because their populations are less than 2.5%. Whereas in Queensberry, the 5 supervisors collectively, their vote is cut nearly in half. It goes from 42.5% board votes, goes to 25% in committee. And if you look at it individually, it's even more dramatically impacted, because that's looking at it collectively. This is not one person, one vote. Next slide. Now this is information from last year. I have not looked at the changes that Chairman Garrity made this year. And I hope that you do set up the committee that John recommends, and they can look at it, and maybe it's fixed with the changes that Chairman Garrity made. But in this case, in 2015, Queensberry and Glens Falls, with a combined population of 65%, only had 37% of the chairmanships and 42% of the committee seats. Whereas the 10 town supervisors from Upcounty, representing 35% of the county population, had 62% of the committee chairmanships and 57% of the committee seats, and also held the powerful positions of chairman of the board, budget chairman, and finance chairman. So I decided to look into why that is. The answer I came up with is Warren County is a hybrid government. The current board, with 20 members, is a mix of 11 town supervisors and 9 legislator-type supervisors. This includes the 4 Queensberry large supervisors and the 5 Glens Falls ward supervisors. So the 11 town supervisors and the 9 legislative supervisors, I've looked at where they are coming from, and they come at the job from very different positions and perspectives. Next slide. Town supervisors. They make the case they are the best equipped to represent their towns at the county because they are keenly aware of the particular problems facing their town. And they're right about that. Absolutely could not agree more with that statement. Town supervisors hold town meetings at night, so they want to hold the county meetings during the day. Again, that's understandable. In 2015, the 10 up-county town supervisors each held at least 1 chairmanship and served on between 9 and 14 committees, with the exception of the chairman of the board, the budget officer, which have unique responsibilities, challenging responsibilities. Understandable. Only Queensberry Town Supervisor Stroud did not hold a chairmanship in 2015 and served on less than 9 committees. He served on 7 committees, which is still a lot. And I understand where Chairman is coming from,
Well, now it's 21 committees.
and now it's 21, and you are a chairman now of Legislative and Rules, and I'm glad to see that as a constituent of Queensbury. And, you have, you know, more than once talked about your demanding schedule at the town, which quite frankly limits your abilities to spend time up here, which is true. At-large and ward supervisors, they come at the job very differently. All 4 Queensbury at-large supervisors right now have real demanding jobs during the day. It's a fact, this limits their involvement in committees and attendance at committee meetings. It's a major issue considering 99% of the resolutions get approved at the board meetings. This needs to be addressed, or otherwise the situation will continue at the county. It'll be an unbalanced situation in committee. And finally, the Glens Falls Mayor is not on the Board of Supervisors, the second largest municipality, and Warren County is the only municipality without chief executive representation on the board. And I would note that the Lake George Village Mayor also does not serve on the county board, but the village is part of the town of Lake George, while Glens Falls stands alone. But I would ask this committee to also take a look at the village of Lake George and the mayor there. So how do we fix this? I would say the thing not to do is weighted voting in committees. Trying to establish a weighted voting system in committee would be a mathematical quagmire. I don't know how you would do it. The only solution that is realistic and meets the one person, one vote criteria in the Constitution is to create equally divided districts. Next slide, please. But to fix the current board would require extreme measures. Town populations, they vary from 1.1% to 42.5%. If we took the current system and considered the smallest district to be 1.1%, and then created equally divided districts through at-large representation, taking this to the extreme, you'd have 90 members of this board. 90 equal members of the board, one vote, one person. That's, of course, not a situation that anybody is supportive of. So evenly divided districts under the current board and a weighted voting system in committee is not the answer. The legislature would fix this hybrid form of government. There's a lot of different ways to go. Supervisor Straw has taken time to slice it and take a look at it. So have I. I've come up with 9 equally divided voting districts for Warren County, each legislator getting one vote representing their evenly divided districts. This would take Warren County to 9 legislators, or 1 legislator for 7,200 people. The largest county in Suffolk County has 18 legislators, each representing 83,000 people each. This would cut the current board in half, saving taxpayers money. With the legislature, committee meetings can now be held at night, so people who work during the day have the opportunity to attend. Town supervisors would have the opportunity to focus on their towns, which rightly so are their priority. The county is a complex operation with a $150 million budget and multiple departments. Legislators would have the opportunity to focus solely on the county. There is now the opportunity to substantially reduce the number of committees and committee meetings, making county government more efficient and less expensive. And there's my proposal.
Okay.
Next slide. My recommendation is to agree with Chairman Strauss and form a committee, but I would ask it be made up not of supervisors. The last thing all of you need is another committee to sit on. I would ask that you identify citizens from a cross-section of the county who can provide an objective review, and I would include in that review exploring the idea of a county executive. There's my website. You can go there and read the full presentation, the 2 papers I've written on it, and my 120 newsletters that I wrote as a supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Westcott. Supervisor Leggett, would you give your presentation, please?
Thank you, Supervisor Strauss. Kim.
That's where Amanda put it.
There you go.
You are correct.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak before the committee. Thank you, Mr. Westcott, for providing that introduction. This is a serious issue, and I think it does require good consideration. And for that, I pulled together a bit of a presentation here. Here is a proposal. It doesn't work from this far away. That's the trouble. Can you open up those doors? There we go. So this is what's proposed. Change board of supervisors to another form, perhaps a legislature. The premise for change, as we heard here, is that it violates the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. I see that this is the cornerstone of this academic exercise. Upholding that, the linchpin to it, is that it's a hybrid form of government that's not balanced and fair. We've had a long fight for fair representation. Led us to the Constitution to form a more perfect union. And we've worked with liberty and justice. We will get this going. There we go. Equality has had a longer and harder road to hoe. 1868, the 14th Amendment, that created the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Equality had a longer march here, 1920. 19th Amendment, women finally got the right to vote. 1960s, Civil Rights Movement, still more equality. Civil Rights Act, and then what we would consider the final word in the Reynolds versus Sims, 1964, where the one person, one vote doctrine was established. But as we heard, it may not yet be the final word. Do we count population by registered voters or by the number of people? Right now, as we sit here, the Supreme Court is sitting on this decision. But as it is today, here we are, equalized, weighted votes. But it's contended maybe that is not the case. Decisions at the county are made in committee, and some would argue behind closed doors, that this is really where the power is, that this is really where the decisions are made. But do we really need to throw out board supervisors for this thing that happens to be one of the failings of human nature? Let's check the facts. So, on the first point for premise for change here, it's based on, there's been court cases across New York, most specifically Nassau County, that have been deemed unconstitutional. If you look at the article that's cited in here from the New York Times, you'll see that it was New York Civil Liberties Union that filed it. They had a 6-member board, and that representatives from large towns and cities had more votes than those from smaller communities, and it discriminated against the county's longtime have-nots. And almost every elected and appointed official was a white Republican. So, if you also look at this article, you will see that the man that came up with the mathematical formula for the weighted voting system that this court case went over said Nassau County did a terrible job about coming up. They made a total mess, everything apart from what he had planned. So, if we look at Warren County on the bottom chart here, that it would go to say that you would have a Republican majority in this county. You have 2 to 1, anywhere from 1 to 2 to 1 to 3 ratio. Also, Nassau County, 10 of the wealthiest communities in New York State, 7 of them are from Nassau County. The top one, over $250,000 of median household income. They don't report anything over that. Number 1, poorest community in New York State, right here in Warren County, right here in the town of Chester, hamlet of Pottersville. There's a disparity between these two counties. I don't think it's a fair comparison to make. So, I would say behind premise number 1, allegation, not a fact, that we do not violate the 14th Amendment, that 16 counties are still governed by a board of supervisors, but because one county is found in violation of the 14th Amendment does not mean they all are. And not all counties have the same problem. This county needs to be assessed on its own merits. And not all towns in the county are created equal. Those of us that live inside the blue line have a whole nother set of circumstances. We are from the land of rocks and water. Queensbury happens to be down in the land of milk and honey. And this needs to be taken into consideration whenever there's going to be any discussion of the governance of this county. Premise for change number 2. It's a hybrid form of government that's not balanced and fair. The point being made that decisions are made in committee, that there's pressure on the supervisors to get in line, that it's good old boy politics at work, and that is where the power is from. That is based on one of the examples from the Warren County legislative paper about a confidence vote that came to the conclusion if it were up to just the legislative supervisors, that vote would have been defeated versus being approved. And I would say, in a democracy, you win some and you lose some. And that will happen in any other pluralistic democracy, any form of it, whether it's the legislative or the board of supervisors. So, we're now here. What can we do to get this right? We will all admit that this is not a perfect form of government. Something needs to be changed, but how do we go about it? This is what I propose. First, we need to know where we're heading. What are we studying? What is it in comparison to? We need to define what that goal is that is big enough to encompass this whole county and what it is we really want. We need to assess the problems and needs. Right now, it is theoretical. What's the reality of that? From that, we develop alternative solutions that tie back into achieving these goals that we want for the county, and then we vote on that. So, to be board of supervisors or not to be a board of supervisors? That's the question. Thank you.
All right, well, I want to thank Supervisor Leggett and Supervisor Westcott for their presentations. And it's 10 o'clock. What do you want to do?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion, you're making that a motion? All right, well, does this committee wish to have this issue, and this committee wishes to deal with this issue? Or would you rather form a separate committee called a county governance committee? Or another thought?
I for one, would like to send it on to the full board for the board to decide, do we want to explore it further, and if so, how? You know, it's easy for a few of us sitting here, but this is something that will ultimately affect all of us. I think it's more appropriate that it goes to the full board. So I'd make a motion, we make a motion that we send a resolution to the full board asking the board whether it would like to proceed with exploring alternative forms of government or not.
Chairman Garrity,
I'll second it.
yes, that motion got seconded. Supervisor Wood is suggesting that we send this back to the entire board for further discussion.
I'm okay with that. committee, if that's what the committee does, that's the way we normally work things. And then do an up and down vote of the board.
Yeah, possibly, or form a committee if that's the board's wishes. Okay, well, we have a motion on the table and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Supervisor McDevitt?
Yeah, maybe my motion to adjourn was a little premature, okay?
Nobody seconded that.
That's right. Yeah.
All right.
I did wanna just mention one thing. There's been an awful lot of discussion about this, and we've got to come to a resolution and a decision, okay? Whether that's the full board, but let's not delay on this. Let's either move forward or let's stop it, okay? But this discussion has gone on so long.
Okay, well, Supervisor McDonald is,
I just want to make a request to the committee to not necessarily lump in the issue of the mayor joining the board of supervisors, because in my mind, it's a separate issue from what the presentations were about today, and the issue with the mayor sitting on the board can take on the form, be entered into with the current form of
well,
government.
Supervisor McDonald, that could come out at the full board discussion if that's what this committee decides to take action on. Yes, Supervisor.
I agree with Supervisor McDevitt that we shouldn't sit on it too long if the board is as a whole wants to go forward. So I'm requesting that we amend the resolution going up to the full board to say, if we take it on, that some sort of committee study this issue and then it not be our committee.
That could be one of the options put before the full board, yes. Supervisor Seaver?
Just as we were getting ready for the presentation, Evelyn and I had a chance to speak briefly. I asked what her comments were, not being able to share them with the full board, and, you know, she makes a valid point, that if we have an issue in Queensbury, we need to fix it in Queensbury. If the city of Glens Falls has an issue in the city of Glens Falls, they need to fix it within the city of Glens Falls. I recognize the way all of us work together, and certainly we've tried to always see the perspective of each other's towns and communities. But for purposes of bringing this to the full board for a vote, perhaps it should be a little clearer in terms of going to the full board. Are we voting to move it to a citizens committee? You know, what type of committee, what is that vote exactly?
Those options can come up at the full board meeting discussion. Yes, Supervisor Bramer?
I just find it troubling that we'll have a resolution in front of the board and it won't have those options. It won't say what is our course forward if we go forward.
Chairman
we just-
Garrity, can you make sure that when those,
We'll put options in there.
we'll put options
Somebody
in there.
capture it, give Supervisor Stroud what options you would like in the amendment, and maybe we'll vote twice.
Okay.
One way for option A, option B, or an option C, whatever you want,
Well, what the original resolution that I seconded said, we're gonna vote on whether we wanna continue or we don't wanna continue, period. So if we vote that we wanna continue, then those options would be things that we would discuss. But basically, what we're saying here is, do we wanna continue this discussion on whether we become a board of legislator or what, or not? It was a pretty simple resolution.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor and a second, and there's been discussion on, we will send this to the Board of Supervisors for a general discussion with some options included, and that will not negate other options being presented at the discussion. All those in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to that say nay. All right, it passed unanimously. And is there a motion? Yes.
Can I put my 2 cents in before you
Well, we are gonna have a general board discussion.
We were worried about equalization on committee meetings by votes. Right now, you got 4 Queensbury supervisors voting on this, and 3 Glens Falls supervisors, and 1 from the 2 towns. Is that a proper representation?
Well, at the full board, you're gonna
I'm
have,
just bringing out a point that that's what
That's right.
it's coming about, to have proper representation on our committees. Then you got 4 from Queensbury, who's got the largest amount of votes, 3 from Glens Falls, forget about the rest of us. So you got two small towns.
all right.
That's only my observation.
Well, thank you Supervisor Molino.
We
And
didn't
this-
wanna throw our weight
this
around.
I know, this discussion will continue. Motion to adjourn? Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
McDevitt and, Bramer. We're adjourned.
Can we get the motion?
All right,